everyone. I'm Ekta and we are Read a Kitab. Welcome all of you. Today we are here to talk about this amazing book, Her Space, Her Time by Sohini Ghosh. And we are going to have the author with us today to have this conversation. Looking forward for this amazing talk because the book is absolutely stunning. And I'm going to, invite, my fellow people with me for this interview. And hi Abhishek, hi Neeraj, hi Anurag. So I'll just add them. Hi everyone. Hi everyone. Good
Hi,
evening.
Hi, hello.
hi. Good evening.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi, good evening. And I'm very excited to be, here today and we're going to talk to Shohini. Hi Shohini, how are you?
Hi, Shubh.
Can you
Hi.
hear me?
Amazing to have you here. And, thank you for joining us today. And all those who have just joined us and who will be joining us, we are going to have this amazing conversation with Shohini Ghosh on our amazing book, Her Space, Her Time. And we absolutely are thrilled to talk to her. The book is amazing. So, Shohini, I have with me Neeraj.
Hi. Sorry, I just muted myself. Hi, how are you, Shohi?
Great. Nice to meet you.
And I have with me Abhishek.
Hi, Shohini. How are you doing? So nice to meet you.
Very nice to meet you too.
And I'm Ekta and we are Read a Kitab. So amazing to be having this conversation today with Shohini. And this, we when we thought of doing this interview, we were just wondering when we read the book, we were so amazed by the way it is written and everything that the book talks about. So just to add this and to give a background, Shohini is a master storyteller, that I have to tell you, which we'll talk much in detail. But she's also a professor of physics and computer science at Wilfrid Laurier University. And she's also the founder and director of the Laurier Center for Women in Science. And she's the first person of color to be elected president of the Canadian Association of Physicists. So this is a wow achievement, and this is so amazing to know. And the book completely, very deeply talks about all the amazing stuff that we're going to talk to Shohini today. And thank you, Jeko, for being a partner to this talk. So, Shohini, we are just kind of thrilled, after we read your book and we were like, oh my God, what have we just read? And I can clearly say this is one of the best non-fiction works that I have ever read. So, and clearly, of the year. So, I was telling, today we were discussing, and one question. So, just wanted to start off like that, and then, off to you, and we would want to hear from you more. Just to add to this, that when you wrote, this book contains so many examples, which talks about women in science, and how they faced their life and what consequences were there, how they were not given credit any point in time, even though they did very breakthrough discoveries. And when you wrote this book, like right now, do you think there is a change, or things have kind of gone for better? I mean, I would really want to know that from you to begin with.
Um, sure. That's a great question to start with because, of course, one of the reasons I wrote the book was not just to bring this historical these stories to light, but it's because they still are relevant, really, really relevant. Not to say that things have not changed. Of course, things have certainly improved in many ways, and we have this conversation all the time about all of these kinds of issues that we face. But that being said, we're not close to true equity and inclusion in the sciences as yet. And a lot of the barriers that these women faced, some of them over 100 years ago, we still have to think about carefully and deeply, and we need to change structures and cultures. So that's what really connects these women to what we experience today. And things are changing, but a little slow for my taste.
I don't know. When I was reading the book, I was having a lot of emotional reaction to the book because I know it's a book on physics and the Big Bang and the molecules and the structure of atoms, and I don't know why I was having the emotional reaction. However, I when I was So here is an incident that happened. I interacted with one of my students who got 99 percentile in one of the MBA entrance examinations in India, and he basically got into one of the top MBA colleges. And I was just having this candid conversation, and I ended up recommending your book, by the way. But the thing is, he said that here I am, 99 percentile, and I have to share my classroom with with a female who only has 86 percentile, and I just did not know where to begin. I just ended up recommending your book. So like how I was like I guess my question is, how should I answer, how should I handle this question?
This comes up a lot. This question of whether, inclusion and all of these what we call, you know, ways to include more women, whether that is coming somehow at the cost of merit. So, is it merit versus inclusion? That's a false kind of dichotomy there. And the reason is this, that yes, 99 percentile is a number, as is 86 percentile, but behind the number, there is a lot of backstory. There are privileges and opportunities and platforms and all kinds of
Absolutely.
supports that have led that to have 99% versus whoever this woman or somebody else who we don't know their background have 86%, but without any of those kinds of support. So we have to think, is one really better than the other? So the point is that the way we assess merit is already biased. So you can't just hold up a number and say, "Yep, this person is better." Somebody says, "Well, I have a better score, therefore I'm better." I don't think that that is really necessarily true. Secondly, even though there may be, a fair way of assessing people who are best, even in such a case, you might end up in a situation where yes, we still choose to include, let's say, more women or underrepresented minorities because we have to correct the historical injustices at some point, because all of that happened on during a time when there wasn't a level playing field. So in order to level it, now we have to do that kind of correction. So anybody who's complaining now, maybe they should stop and think, hey, they've had the entire human history of advantage. So to step back a little bit is only fair anyway. So those are my 2 points that I would make.
And you know what? I think that's a very befitting reply to the likes of Elon Musk also, because
Oh yeah. Yeah. So we shouldn't forget Elon Musk's own background, right? We're not talking about some kid who pulled himself up by, whatever his own guts and merit alone, right? This guy had a lot of background there. He comes from a diamond mining family, for example. Not really, the kind of person that knows about what struggle really is, to be honest. So I take everything he says with a grain.
Uh, uh, Last year we
Just to
yeah,
interrupt, I just wanted to say, because Shohini's voice is breaking. Is it breaking only for me, or you guys are also feeling
a
the
little
same?
bit,
very slightly, very
Yeah,
slightly
slightly.
it is.
yeah. Probably we will mute ourselves, so probably we can hear, properly. So all those who have joined us just now, sorry to interrupt you, Abhishek. We are talking about the book Her Space, Her Time, and much more than this with Shohini Ghosh. So yeah, stay tuned. This is going to be a very interesting conversation. Yeah, Abhishek, off to you.
So thanks, Ekta. So, Shohini, my question. So last year we spoke to author Bonnie Garmus. She has written this book, Lessons in
Yes.
Chemistry. So in that also the protagonist has been wronged. Her contribution has never been considered, and she's a chemist. And that was a fictional account set in the 60s America. And you have written a very real nonfiction about story about real scientists, real scientists who are women and who have never got their due, whose names have never appeared and never been spoken about. We don't know about them. So I'm just wondering how many such fiction, non-fiction books, narratives are we still going to need for for the collective humanity to wake up and see that this is what is it.
The $1 million question, right? So, I mean, personally, I was really happy that Bonnie Garmis's book made such a splash because at least that's raising the awareness. However, I think there's a danger of people reading it because it's written in a pretty entertaining way. It's really kind of fun to read it.
Yes.
But it's also, of course, it should enrage people as well because she is drawing from all of these kinds of real life cases to try to describe what it is for actually real women scientists even today, and not just a fictional. That fiction is just her vehicle for making those points. But I think when you read fiction, sometimes there's a danger of tending to think that it can't be real. So I worry a little bit that that might happen in this case. However, any conversation is better than no conversation.
Absolutely.
So I think, it's a really important topic, and bringing it forward in an entertaining way really helps. How long will it take? Well, there's actually been studies to try to figure out, given the current rates of, let's say, science hiring in universities, for example, in any area of science. What would be the time before, let's say, 50% of, let's say, all professors would be women? And then that's just one, group, that we need to focus on. There's, of course, other axes also, but let's take that. So in physics, which is my discipline, they did that kind of an estimate, and the answer was it would take 100 years at current rates of hiring
Oh
and
my
progress.
God.
So there you go. There's an actual number. And that maybe this is what we should be talking about to get people to go, oh my God. And then
Oh
maybe
my
people will
God.
start saying, no, that's not acceptable. Right?
And
So we need to do better.
it boggles my mind that there is a study like this.
Yes.
And though it's good, like at least we now have a number, we have a figure, but it just boggles my mind that there is a study like this. I mean, oh my
Yeah.
God.
Are men conducting those studies? Just on a lighter note. I mean, they would have extrapolated the number, or maybe kind of downsized the number, saying that
Downsize,
okay,
yeah.
they will be happy if we say just 100 years. Looks very.
Let's give it to them.
Yeah, just give it to them.
Oh God.
Yeah.
But Shohini, what a fantastic book. And it is like every page you read, you're like thrown apart. But yeah, adding to what Neeraj was saying, Shohini, even I have, a few sentences, a lot actually, but, I'll just read one which I wanted to read, from the book which is like on the introduction, page number 14, which says that, in recent years, girls in high school in many countries are outperforming boys in math and science, a trend that upends the gender myth. Clearly, breasts and other female body parts are not impediments to doing physics. And I was like, oh my God, there are so many such moments of brilliance that you have written. And I was just wondering, are you on the other side a sly writer?
I write based on what I'm feeling and thinking, I guess. And I think that, yeah, of course, sentences like that come from a place of, I guess, frustration, but also I need to approach it with humor and, a sense of optimism, right? Because in the end, to advocate for change, you have to believe that it's possible. And so you have to be an optimist, I think, in the end. So yeah, there's some sarcasm in there, but mostly, in a way that is about pushing us to think about these things more and trying to, highlight how absurd some of these ideas are, and we just have these myths that never go away.
Yeah.
And why would we ever imagine that whether or not we can do a math equation has anything to do with the rest of our biology, right? It's such a strange idea when you think about it. And yet, how long has it lasted? And it's been just embedded into our cultures around the world.
Yes.
So to me, that's what I was trying to bring out a little bit of, just the absurdity of it all too.
I have a personal favorite, one of the quotes from the book, and this is just to highlight how brilliant this book is. Actually, it's filled with such amazing sentences. So, this is, I think, on page 179. Just wanted to read it out if that's okay. Walk into any store today and guess where you will find the cars and the construction sets and where you will find the dolls. The boys section and the girls section are stereotypical worlds apart. It wasn't like that. Shopping for toys in the early 1900s would have been quite a different experience. Most toy shops were not gender segregated, and neither were the toys, not even dolls. Then capitalism happened. I mean, this is like everything that is wrong with the world right now, probably.
And it's before you answer, it's not even beating around the bush. It's like then capitalism happened, and it reminded me so much of the YouTuber I follow, Sabine Hossain Fender. She says whatever it is. I mean, I was like, okay, I so enjoy listening to and being told like this is what it was.
Yeah, sometimes you can't sugarcoat it. You just have to tell it like it is, right? And I'm also, by the way, I enjoy listening to Sabina a lot as well. So yeah, absolutely, Uh, yeah, I mean, I think for me, again, it was about trying to get to the heart of some of these issues and also look at it more from these structural kinds of systemic approaches. As in, it's not often we talk about, stories like hero stories, for example, Einstein's story, or, Darwin or so, all these people who have made huge contributions, and we celebrate them as individuals separate from, systems and cultures and societies. And when we try, the opposite is also true. When somebody has a challenge and has overcome those barriers and has still succeeded, like the women in this book, it's it's easy to think of them also as heroes in their own right, which they were, but they were part of systems that created those challenges. So that's why I wanted to make sure to discuss the context. In this case, talking about today's trends around extreme consumerism and capitalism and the drivers of all of our choices, which we think are so free, but are not necessarily that. So those things are part of what creates these barriers or may create privileges for some. So unless we see it in those ways, there's really not going to be much change other than addressing every single challenge as a separate thing individually. That's a slow process and will not really fix anything. It's a band-aid, I would say. So that's why also I wanted to go and go straight to the heart of these kinds of issues.
In fact, with this, I think the gender stereotyping which has been happening, and you're talking about toys, dolls. So you think you're probably hinting at that we break this gender stereotyping from with the children. We start with them.
Absolutely. And I think it's so I want to say that it's created. This is not something that is somehow an inherent natural way that it has to be, and that there are specific roles that boys are better at or girls are better at. It's created by things like, profit margins, really.
Mm.
So if that's the case, to me, actually, it might sound like that's a terrible thing, but to me, it's good news because it means it can be changed. If we can create one thing, we can uncreate it and do something else.
Mm.
So for me, this is all good news. As long as it's something that is within the power of us human beings to make a change for, we can do it. See optimism.
I was actually going to
very
ask you on
powerful.
optimism because in your book you have not just shared the stories about such great scientists, but your own story also. And despite everything, I was just wondering, how do you retain that optimism? Because you just said I was fighting for that word optimism.
Yes. So I'm not saying that everything is always rosy and wonderful all the time. There are challenges, there are frustrations, and I think you learn, of course, from failures. And any scientist will tell you that most of our lives are spent trying to figure out ways around, all kinds of obstacles in our scientific work. But in this case, there are other challenges and failures, and personally also, I've faced them. But I guess for me, the most important piece, which is what I was also referring to just now, that it's I keep in mind that there really is no difference between the way I can explore and access the biggest questions of the universe than anybody else. No matter what we make up as human beings, as you must be, whatever, cooking and cleaning in the kitchen versus studying physics, that's all made up stuff, really. But when I want to think about how the universe works and what is a black hole and how does gravity work, it's not that any of those equations have any kind of gender variables in them. So that's what I think in the end is going to be a driver for me, as in that's not going to change. So because of that, I think that we can absolutely, tap into the almost like the wonder of the universe itself, is something that is so magical that it gives you that push when you need it and makes you get up no matter how many times you've fallen, because there's so much more to discover.
Yeah.
So true. And Shohini, I mean, everything that you have written and everything that you're telling us is kind of also giving me goosebumps, because we've been reading all these narratives, and I don't know, but I still feel that there is a lot more to go, and like we talked about those 100 years, so yeah. But also before I go to my next question, which I want to ask you, I want to give a huge shout out to Scott Alexander Howard, who is the author of The Other Valley, and he's just joined us. So yeah, hi Scott, thank you for joining us. And all the people who've joined us, thank you for joining us. We are talking about Shohini Ghosh's this book, Her Space, Her Time. This is an amazing, amazing book and a must read for all of you. We are thrilled, after reading this book and also after talking to Shohini. So Shohini, I really, really wanted to also ask you that, today, if you look at the kind of dynamics or the resume of the people on this talk are, two of us are engineers and one is a doctor, and you have already outsmarted us, with being a physicist. So we can already see the difference. So you are already breaking stereotypes. So I just wanted to have your 2 cents on that as well.
Well, I think that I get the luxury of dreaming and writing equations that are not really directly connected to useful things that people can use every day, but you all are doing actual real world work that so I think we all have our roles, right?
That's capitalism. So
it's all about benefit to society. I think we all contribute in our own ways.
And also talking about your story, in like one of the anecdotes that you do share, that you did receive a certificate where it said Master Shohini Ghosh, and they hastily removed the word master, corrected it, but they forgot to pronounce he.
Yeah. Yes, that's a true story. I have an actual photo of the certificate. I considered adding it as an image in the book, but then it didn't really. It didn't have the resolution. So yeah, it's because I moved from a girls' school to a co-education school. So the school I moved to used to be a boys' school, and then they included girls. So I was in the first cohort to be in the co-ed school branch, and so everything was also designed, of course, for assuming that it was a boys' school. So I think that was part of it, and also I guess they were not ready for girls,
Right.
and they were certainly not ready for girls to be winning prizes. So nobody had thought about changing and making new certificates when the girls won prizes. So they still had only the master such and such, who and congratulations to him or whatever. So yeah, that was.
In the hindsight, these might actually look like things like that are like fluffy and we can laugh it off. But when they are actually happening, and it's very important because I think one of the reasons the book also resonated with me is I'm a Kathak dancer, and I'm like a so I was like, okay, I do understand your whole concept of invisibility, that you started off with black hole and the giant blue star, and then you just ask us to imagine like a couple in the walls, they are dancing,
Dancing, yes.
right? And you can make out, and it's, thank you so much for writing this.
It's yeah, I think that absolutely. I think when we start feeling all of the science and the universe with our bodies, we really understand it. So yeah, I think that anybody who's done that or expressed themselves in these ways would really connect with the way sometimes scientists think about things like equations. It's not like when I'm trying to solve a problem, that the equations are just symbols and numbers. Actually, they're representations of something else. And I think it's the same with artists. You try to represent feelings or different types of situations, and we do the same through our expressions, which are also abstractions, and that's models and in this case I was trying to come up with an easy metaphor that people would connect to. So that's why the dance. Yeah, that's great. That as a dancer, I think it makes a good connection. Yeah.
Yeah.
It
And the book starts on a roller coaster ride.
That was my immediate reaction. I read the introduction, and I called up Ekta, and I was like, I have to read this book. It's so amazing, and like Ekta rightly pointed out, it's one of the best non-fiction books, or rather one of the best books, I should say, of the year that we have read so far. And going back to lessons in chemistry, and also your book, lessons in chemistry in most of the bookstores, I found it in the non-fiction section, because people think that it is full of chemistry, right? And probably your book also, people might think, okay, it's like a physics lesson or something like that. I guess what I'm trying to ask is, like, what has been your writing process? What are things that you read apart from the obvious narrative? What was your writing process? What was your research process? I was very interested in knowing that.
Yeah. So of course, as a scientist, most of my writing, like the most experience that I have with writing is, of course, as a scientific writer, which is scientific journals and so on, which is a very, very different type of writing. As a reader, of course, that's very different. Ever since I was a little kid, I loved mysteries and mystery novels. I'm a big, Agatha Christie fan, of course. And, yeah. And then as I grew older, I also read a lot of science fiction. So not just the non-fiction. I love, of course, well-written nonfiction, for example, and an author that I think had a huge impact on me was Carl Sagan. And not just because he could explain the science, which of course he could, but he wrote it in a way that felt very poetic. So going back to the idea of how you express it and the art of it. So for me, that was what it was all about in terms of the wonder and the joy of the science. So when I sat down to write this, it was actually during the pandemic. And I feel like partly it was also self-therapy to, you want to do and think about things that you love and you're passionate about. And this was a way for me to write. And I did approach it as a science book where the people are, of course, at the center of the story. But it is a scientific mystery story is really what I approached it. And I think that was absolutely shaped by the fact that I personally am such a fan of mysteries. So if you look at the book, each chapter is actually about a particular topic of physics or astronomy. So as you said, one topic is about, the Big Bang and the history of time. Another one is about particle physics and dark matter and so on. And so each one was about the big mystery, the big scientific mystery at the center of it, and the process by which it's, you solve it, all the clues. So it became almost like a detective story, and the scientists were the detectives. So that is how I approached weaving in the stories. because I didn't really want this to become, a book of biographies, because I'm not actually a historian, and I think that I couldn't tell the full life stories of these women in one book. I think each woman has, there's so much more to their stories. So I really wanted to tell that scientific, detective story that they had. And detectives also face all kinds of barriers, and
Yeah.
the whole joy of reading a good such mystery is to not just know the answer, but know how they got there and how did they get around everybody, all the bad guys and things like this. So there's plenty of bad guys in my book as well. So that was kind of how I approached the writing. And the research actually has been happening for many, many years throughout my own career. As I've been teaching about these topics, I've spent a lot of time trying to dig out all of those hidden stories, because I've learned that honestly every single physics discovery or some big breakthrough, when you read the standard sort of Google summary of it, but then you go to the actual sources of the research journals and start digging around a little and looking at histories and archives and so on, there's always another story behind it. So now I've learned I always go and check a little more to see what else is there.
In fact, I just went to one of the generative AIs, ChatGPT, and I just asked the question, could you name the top 10 scientists, and only Marie Curie was mentioned, and I kept on asking probing questions like, what about, let's say, a scientist who within a span of 6 years from your book itself went from between 1898 to 1904, Harriet Brooks. Had discovered the element radon, measured its half-life, kick-started the understanding of radioactive. So many, like within a span of 6 years, and like no mention in the generative AI also.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Yeah.
And and you know what, Shohini, just to add to what Neeraj was saying, after that we were just discussing about this, and then I added, about Canyon Jump, and then AI just gave me the same line that is there in your book, that she was one of the first ones to do this, and I was like a little surprised because it never talked about anything other than Marie Curie. So we were just thinking that even the AI data is so skewed.
Yeah, absolutely. AI knows us well, so it has learned all of our biases, and yeah, sadly, it's the same thing if you go on Google and just do a search for famous physicists. You get whatever 50 names, and maybe one or two are women. But when you search for famous women physicists, it knows about all these names. It just doesn't think them to be worthy
Important
of
Correct.
the
enough.
yeah. Yeah. So it's sad. So, invisibility is real online and in our world. It still exists.
Uh, the book speaks about all these injustices that have been done. So it's like I wonder, like, what would you say to all the women right now who are being slighted, who are not receiving their due, and who are being snubbed? How should what would you tell them? How should they, stand up for themselves, own what is, ask for what is theirs?
Well, I think the question itself actually assumes that it's on them, it's their burden. And that's already a problem, right? The question really should be asked to the person who's done the snubbing, or the workplace that is not giving them the credit. That's the problem. We constantly try to help the women by saying, yeah, this is how you stand up for yourself, and you should speak out, and you should take these professional development courses, or you should go on this leadership institute, blah blah blah. Nobody ever goes to the colleague and says, you should pay more attention to what the woman said in that meeting, because she had a point and you ignored her. Nobody says to the leader saying, what's wrong with your leadership process, because clearly you don't have all the women who are deserving in leadership positions. That's not on the women, it's on everybody else who
True.
is contributing to this problem. So that's what I think the better approach, because every time we advise women to do better, of course we will adapt. Women are pretty amazing and strong, and we're used to that, but it's actually in the end hurting our battle, because we're making it okay for everybody else then to sit back because we're adapting. So it's time for us to even just stop doing that and saying, well, it's not our problem, actually. It's everybody else's
True,
problem. They need to step up.
true,
Yeah.
true.
So true, Shohini, and thank you for talking about this. Also, I was wanting to ask you that from being a scientist to being, writing this rocker of a book which talks about so much more, in the garb of talking about stars and the Big Bang, and so much more. And it is not just about identifying or making women visible, but it also talks about life and how the world is currently. So why we would really want to know from you what has been your journey, because I know this is a very cliche question and we don't ask this to authors, but I'm very curious to know it from you, because I'm sure your journey would inspire a lot of us.
Sure, I'm happy to share. I'm born and raised in India, moved around a lot. My dad changed jobs a lot, so I was actually born in Mumbai, and then we lived for some time in Hyderabad and Delhi. But my family's from Kolkata. I'm Bengali, so I went to school in Kolkata for many years, and I do want to say, I mean, we've talked a lot about challenges and so on, but I think in the end, the book, for me, certainly these women are inspirational. So, part of what I missed when I was a kid growing up in Kolkata was inspirational stories of women scientists. I didn't really know any names. I mean, yes, Marie Curie probably, but even that was a name just from, like, you hear it in, popular science context, but not really even in our physics textbooks. She doesn't really appear. And the woman that I wish I had heard about when I was a kid, probably the favorite woman for me personally in this book is Bibha Chaudhary.
Bishra Chaudhary.
Yeah, Bengali woman. Was doing amazing work in the 40s in India, back under, British times, when there was really no funding being given to Indian scientists in India, right? There were some Indian scientists, but they were working outside India. And in India, she was doing this incredible work, trying to detect these invisible particles in the atmosphere. And she was able to figure out, using this very new technique, she was able to detect this new type of particle, which nobody else had ever discovered before, but she couldn't confirm it because they just didn't have the resources. So I tell the story about how she gave up on that work, and then after the war, somebody in England took her exact technique with better resources and did confirm the discovery and won the Nobel Prize. So her story, which is, I mean, she was, of course, she continued. She was actually the first woman to be hired at Tata Institute ever as a physicist. So she went on to have a good career, but not at the level it should have been. And yet, given that she was involved in these kinds of huge discoveries of particles like this one called the pion, and also this other particle, the neutrino, you'd think she should get a mention, at least in Bengal, in Kolkata. Her name should be known. She's not even listed as an alumni on her high school page in India and things like this. So I mean, looking back, I wish we had those kinds of stories, and I think that would really help even today with young kids growing up and thinking about doing science as a career. But for me, luckily, I did have a lot of encouragement to be curious and explore on my own. I wasn't pressured one way or the other by my parents in terms of careers or anything like this. And I enjoyed, as I said, mysteries and science and working things out for myself. So I gravitated towards mathematics and physics, and I didn't know that was unusual, to be honest, because luckily nobody kept telling me that. So I, ended up, we moved to Singapore. So I finished high school in Singapore and then went to the US for my studies. And to be honest, that's when things started becoming more difficult, because at the university level, it can be quite lonely, right? Because there were not really any women in my classrooms. There were no people of color. So quite isolating. And looking back, I think that was kind of the first time when I started doubting whether I should, continue, because I wasn't sure. Maybe the reason I didn't see others like me was because somehow that I didn't have the skill set. Those kinds of doubts come in. I mean, we know, we all have them, right? It's imposter syndrome. But when you are in the middle of it, you don't really recognize it. It's kind of like you confirm your own fears. And so I thought about dropping out many times, but I think I still loved the science and I was doing well in my classes. So I thought, okay, I'll give it a little more. I'll continue let's see how it goes. And that got me all the way to graduate school. and again, in graduate school was when I had some pretty rough experiences with harassment in the lab and things like this. And I quit a lab that I was working in. And that's when I'm like, okay, next term I'm just going to quit because this is not for me, and something's wrong here. And that term I actually did an independent study with a professor on a project in quantum physics. And so that was, I think it was almost like a moment. Now you think back how important it was. I didn't know at the time, but just in time, because that term, I loved the project so much, and I connected strongly with my professor, and he ended up becoming my PhD advisor. And he still remains one of my close mentors and allies now. So I think that was it. If that had not happened, I would probably not have continued in physics. And by then, quantum computing was becoming really interesting and a big area, and so that's what I did. And eventually moved to Canada because right when I graduated, 9/11 happened in the US. So that was another big moment. Things were different. And also on a student visa at the time, all the laws were changed, right, very, very quickly. So it wasn't really easy to find a position right in that aftermath. So, I looked north, and Canada had some openings, and I had a great opportunity to move there for a postdoc, and that's what I did. And, now after all these years later, I'm still here, and, it's home now. So that's kind of my story.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Rohini, for sharing this with all of us. And I'm sure, I mean, I can't stop recommending this book to all of you, who've joined us and who are going to watch this, after this interview is over. I know a lot of people are going to watch the video after that. So, you have to read this, and I'm going to give this book to my mom and my dad as well to read, because I know they're going to have a great time reading this, and I think everybody should read this. So, we need so many, such stories. Maybe, people like you, people like Bonnie Garmus, and, a lot of other authors who come and write about all of these important things. Maybe they write it, with humor, or they write it with sarcasm, or they, bring in lot many more things which, life talks about, but so important narrative these are. So, can't thank you enough. And all three of us were kind of, talking about it, and we were, loving the book so much. Just wanted to talk to you and ask you that, what are you reading right now?
Oh my gosh. I've been actually nonstop traveling for quite a while, so I keep trying to pick up something to read, but I always have something right beside me that I plan to read. And so what I have right now that I plan to read, remember I told you I'm a big sci-fi fan, so this is the book that I don't know if you can read. It's called Binti. It's by this amazing author, Hugo and Nebula Award winner, Nnedi Okorafor is her name. Yeah, she's fantastic. So I highly recommend her.
Amazing. And yeah, I think Neeraj wants
Yeah,
to.
I
Yes,
just wanted
Neeraj,
to
go
also
ahead.
reflect that maybe people like you are also breaching the quantum barrier, but maybe there is a parallel universe where everything is like just normal, right?
Oh
I
my
just wanted to say it.
gosh. You're so right. There is actually this theory called the many worlds, right? Where in each different parallel universe, there's some other, quantum possibility. And yes, let's imagine that world
That world, right?
and be really jealous of that.
Yeah. I don't know how to frame this question, but I have like two questions. One is, who's your favorite author? So, like, I mean, you can take your time in answering that. But also, who's your favorite scientist? I don't know whether it's the right question to ask, but you have spoken about so many scientists as well.
Oh my gosh, both of them are actually difficult because I don't know if I have one favorite author. One of my favorite authors, in fact, I include her quote in the beginning. The two initial quotes of the book. One of them is by Octavia Butler,
Butler.
who, she's a
Yeah.
wonderful, wonderful writer, and she tackles issues of race and gender through science fiction, actually, in ways that really are they're just mind blowing. So
That
I,
one
I
quote itself is so. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
yeah.
Please go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, yeah, I highly recommend her. So that's one of them. Favorite scientist? Oh my gosh, that one is well. One, as I said, one of them I already mentioned, Bibha Chaudhary, and the other one from the book that I will pick is actually Cecilia Payne Gaposchkin, because she was an amazing astrophysicist, and her huge contribution is that she figured out that all the stars in the universe, they all look different, and of course we can't go and examine them all one by one, but she actually was able to theoretically calculate that they are all actually made up of hydrogen and helium. So today, as I said, we think of a lot of these kinds of discoveries or things that we take for granted, right? As in, yeah, sure, the stars are made up of hydrogen and helium, but somebody had to figure that out and show that it's true for all stars, no matter where they are. And we're talking about trillions and trillions of stars in the universe. And she was able to show this. And the reason for me, it was very inspiring was because she was actually using quantum theory in its very early days, and she was building on work by a physicist much more familiar to us, South Asian physicist, Meghnad Saha. So she built on his work, and then others from the UK also developed some theory, and she was able to put it all together in a new way and have this insight. But there's always a but to all of these stories. So in her case, because it was such a radical idea, and applying this amazing new theory back then, this is 100 years ago, new theory, new idea, new result, people couldn't believe that all stars are the same, and they couldn't believe that the sun is not roughly the same as the earth, right? If they were all formed in the same system, why would it be so different? So people didn't quite believe her, and she had to actually add a sentence in her thesis saying, "Oh, maybe this is not correct." But yeah, this was her PhD thesis work. And then even after she finished and completed her PhD, she didn't really get a position. This was a PhD at Harvard, the first woman actually the first student to get a PhD at Harvard Observatory. And there was no position for her. They wouldn't allow her to have the role of astronomer. She continued to do amazing research. Everybody knew the quality of her work, and yet officially she literally was listed as an assistant in the observatory, and she taught courses that they would not even list it as a course that was being taught, although she was actually teaching the courses. So throughout all of this, the thing that kept her going was her complete passion and commitment to the physics and what she was studying. And that really connected to me, because every time I feel really frustrated, I remembered what I love about the science. And I think that feels like, oh yeah, there's a bond. That's what was really inspiring in her story. And in the end, she was, eventually promoted, like 20, 30 years later, she was promoted to astronomer and professor. And she became department chair at Harvard, like the first woman of any department at Harvard. So it's just this incredible story. I mean, you can't make this up even in fiction, right? This story of such challenge, such huge discovery, and in the end, vindication. So I hope one day she is a household name because, as I said, that this story it's one of the biggest discoveries ever made by humans. We should celebrate it.
Right.
Yeah,
And
there you
we take it for granted.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah.
Uh,
Also, Shoini, I mean, yeah,
I
Abhishek, go
just
ahead.
wanted to ask, is there any favorite book of yours? Mystery.
I think I already.
That you like mysteries. So
On the mystery side.
yeah.
Okay, what have I read recently? I think the one I read recently that I enjoyed quite a bit was Horowitz. Anthony Horowitz is writing some.
Oh
Yeah.
Yeah,
yes.
yeah, yeah.
The Moonflower
I like
Mother.
how complicated they are. There's a
Yes.
story within a story, so it's yeah, very interesting.
We love them too.
Yeah, there you go. Yep. But my favorite mystery is still the mystery of the universe. Gotta say it.
Okay. Yes.
Absolutely. We had such a great time talking to you, Shohini. I hope you enjoy talking to us, and we can go on, and we can kind of keep on talking to you. It's already an hour now.
Wow, no, it's fun.
So yeah, just thank you. And yeah, just wanted to ask you if you have some message for the readers of the community of Reader Kitab, and if you want to, say a few words that would, stay with all of us.
Oh my gosh, so many words. I don't know if I have any more left, but I guess it's a simple message that I try to convey also in the book, and that is that science is for everyone. And science needs everybody because this is our sort of our joint effort. It's a human journey that we're all on together, and it's a common journey because it doesn't matter where you are in the world or even in the universe. As I said, Cecilia Pinchot, all the stars are the same. So I feel like that's a really powerful connection that we all have. And I know that with science books, often readers might be worried that, oh, science is not for me. But I hope that I can convince readers that science is for everybody, and it is our common journey.
Thank you so much, Rohini, and thank you for writing this book. For all those who are watching us, you've got to pick this book and read it. Thank you, Shohini. Thank you for joining us, and thank you, Jeko, for publishing this. And I think this is such a brilliant story to tell. And Shohini, is there anything next coming up in terms of books? your another
Oh,
book.
absolutely. I have. Once you start,
Wow.
yeah, I'm in the middle of developing my next book, and I don't want to say too much. It'll definitely be about science and most likely focused on quantum. So,
Oh, wow.
Oh, lovely.
yeah,
Wow.
yeah. And it'll
Wow.
also, of course, have incredible stories because everywhere you look, there's a great science story to be told.
And if I can, dare say, please, some science fiction also because you write so wonderfully.
Oh my God, and I was wondering, I mean, I was not able to believe that, somebody who's writing all those scientific research papers has written this book. The language is exquisite. The storytelling is fabulous, and the style of writing is so amazing that, you are so much hooked to the book. And today, we were, when we started reading the book, and even today, we were talking about it, thinking, are you serious? I mean, is Shohini only a scientist? Can you believe that? I think she must have written hundreds of stories. This book does not look like something written by a scientist, and the narrative is fantastic. I mean, it's so brilliant.
Wow, it really means a lot to me because honestly, I have actually a huge imposter syndrome about being a writer since that's not really what I'm trained, to do. I mean, I feel like I'm able to do physics more just because that's what I'm officially trained to do. So it really helps me to know that, you've enjoyed the book and the writing. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank
Thank you,
you so
Shoini. Thank you so
much.
much for joining us, and looking forward to the next book talking about quantum physics and a lot more.
Thank,
So,
thank
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 you
you
Thank
for
so
you.
much.
joining
you.
us.
Thank you.
Have a great,
Have
great
a
evening.
great day.
Bye.
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 Thanks. Bye,
Bye.
Bye.
everyone.